Hi, everybody. Today, I want to talk about failures in sales enablement. Specifically, if you get fired, what do you do? What do you do when you're interviewing and they ask you questions about that job where you were fired? How do you handle that? It's a tricky situation. It's definitely an awkward situation. And my contention is most folks mishandle that. And that's what I want to talk about today. So for example, say you were working at Cisco and you were fired after 4 months. Any interviewer will see that and pick up on that because that's a big red flag. And they're going to start to ask questions. And how do you respond to those questions? So what I'll tell you is most people, when asked that question in an interview, will say some version of something like, oh, management was changing all the time. I didn't feel like sticking around. The priorities were changing all the time. It was just a tough place to be there. Something like that. Or frankly, they had no clue what sales enablement was, and it was way too tactical, and I'm more strategic, and so I quit and then went look for another job. Or something like, you know what, I was working there, and then my former boss I had kind of dragged me to another company, and so I went there, even though it was after 4 months. Or something like that, where those all might be true stories, but sometimes they're not true. Sometimes you're just flat out fired because they didn't like the job you were doing. And so when that's the case, what do you say? And my belief is most folks, they mess this up. Because if you give this answer that's not quite true, you're being evasive. And people can typically tell when you're sidestepping or being evasive or vague in your language. And that creates distance and distrust. And that's not what you want in an interview situation. I'll also tell you that in our world today, everybody knows somebody. And so, via LinkedIn, they might see who you worked with and ask those people those questions about you and backchannel you. And they might find out the truth. In fact, I would argue more times than not, they will figure out what really happened. And when that happens, then all of a sudden, when your version of what happened doesn't jive with theirs, you're kind of going to lose some credibility there. And that's obviously not a good thing. And so the third thing I'd say that also happens is this is a missed opportunity. It's a missed opportunity to show introspection, insight, and trust, and build some trust. And so I think people mess that up in a very big way, and it becomes a problem for them when they're trying to get these jobs. So let's just kind of play this out differently. So somebody asks you, oh, I see you left Cisco after only 4 months. What happened? And so I'll make up a story here. But, oh, you know what? I got there at Cisco and realized that their onboarding program was a big mess. And that's kind of what I do really well. And so I spent the 4 months doing that. And also I noticed that our sales asset library was a disaster. And I'd done that at my last company. So I spent some time getting all the assets tagged and organized and figured out. And that became another project that we did because it was frankly low-hanging fruit for the sales team, give them some really good access to assets. So that's what I did. And as I quickly realized, that wasn't really the priority of the organization. That there were other things that were much higher priority. And what I had done wrong was I hadn't spent the time with the sales leadership team to understand what their priorities actually were. And I also wasn't spending time investing with all the sales managers in the field to get to know them, to hear what's happening with them. And that was my fatal mistake. And I will tell you, it cost me my job, and I would never do that again, ever. In fact, when I left there, I went to HP. And when I got to HP, one of the things that I did first was I sat down with my CRO, my head of sales. We built out a 12-month enablement plan. Some people call it a charter. And that made sure I was completely aligned with her priorities. And there was no daylight between what she wanted to do and what I was working on. I also set up a regular cadence. Every week, I met with a different sales manager in the company, and for an hour, and every single week, never canceled it, and made sure that we had complete alignment. I also had a regular one-on-one with my CRO, and I never canceled that because it was too important. And so I learned from that very, very painful mistake at Cisco, and now it's really helped propel me to be a better enablement professional because I know now that that's where I invest the heaviest because I made that mistake. So taking a step back from that story, not a perfect telling, but you see how I owned up to my failure. I completely just embraced and pulled it in. I diffused the bomb before it went off. I didn't give any daylight to the fact that what a back channel story might hear about me and how it differed from what I had said. So what I'll tell you is, this is important because, again, we're in a hyper-connected LinkedIn-centric world, and people will look up and see who you know and ask about your past and do some back channeling. And if they find out, oh, at Cisco didn't do a good job, that's going to be a problem for you. You're dead in the water there. And I would further contend that this is your chance to really earn some credibility and some trust and some rapport with whoever you're talking to, because you're really being vulnerable and highly introspective about what you've done. Most folks, especially today, really have a hard time with honesty and being very, very forthright. And when you do it, it's very refreshing. It's a chance for you to really shine amongst your peers because you're highly introspective and you know what makes good enablement. So if you've had these experiences, I recommend trying it out. It will feel awkward, I promise you, but I think it might be worth it. So try it out and let me know how it goes, and everybody, good luck out there.